challenger Yulia Tymoshenko, third in the polls behind Poroshenko, calls Russia an aggressor country. And Volodymyr Zelenskiy, a TV comedian leading the polls, says the two countries are at war and wants Ukraine to join the EU. Meanwhile, Yuri Boyko, a former ally of ousted Russia-friendly President Yanukovych, is trailing in fourth. While he has courted voters with promises to reverse unpopular heating tariff increases, he is unlikely to win. Part of Russia's Ukraine problem is rooted in arithmetic. Many voters in annexed Crimea and separatist-held eastern Ukraine, an area with a combined population of around 6 million people, according to data published by the separatists, are unlikely to take part in the election as they need to undergo a special registration process on Ukraine-controlled territory. A further 3 million Ukrainians who live and work in Russia will not be able to vote either. Poroshenko is obviously impossible for us to deal with, said one source familiar with Kremlin thinking, who said a Poroshenko win would entrench a political stalemate between Moscow and Kiev. Although Poroshenko was Moscow's worst-case scenario, other candidates were a write-off for Russia too, the source said. A second source close to the Kremlin agreed that a Poroshenko win was Moscow's least favored outcome, but said other candidates, notably Tymoshenko, at least offered a faint hope that the two countries could start talking again. The source noted Tymoshenko had experience of dealing with Russia in gas price negotiations when she was Ukrainian prime minister and might be more pragmatic. Occupiers can't be choosers, that is in part due to his business links to Ukrainian billionaire Ihor Kolomoisky, who has helped finance militia groups to fight against pro-Russian separatists. The two sources familiar with Kremlin thinking said a Poroshenko win would doom any prospect of a deal over eastern Ukraine, while Moscow would welcome an agreement if it protected the interests of Russian speakers there while bringing Russia financial and sanctions relief. Zelensky and Tymoshenko might at least be open to the possibility of talks, said Mark Galeotti, a Russia expert and fellow at the European University Institute in Florence. The political atmosphere in Ukraine and many Ukrainians' feelings about Russia mean that whoever wins will find their room for maneuver limited when it comes to dealing with Moscow. Talk of talking with Russia is politically toxic in many circles. He said he regarded some of the more than 40 presidential candidates as pro-Russian and warned of violent street protests if any future Ukrainian president made concessions to Moscow. Egor Sobolev, a lawmaker from the Self-Reliance political party, which describes itself as centrist, said Ukrainian politicians who had previously advocated for Russia's interests had not changed their views. But he said they understood that voicing those views was self-defeating at a time when Kiev was still embroiled in a conflict with separatists that the United Nations estimates has killed around 13,000 people. The only thing that has changed is how voters think, he said. 70% of Ukrainians now believe Russia is a strategic enemy and not a friend as most people thought 5 years ago.